Being that it's 7 p.m., I'm going to call the meeting to order. Michelle, can you please read the sunshine law?
This is a special meeting of the Mayor and Council of the Borough of Keyport, Tuesday, March 9th, 2021. Let the minutes show that adequate notice of this meeting as required by Public Law 1975, Chapter 231, has been provided by the meeting notice which has been posted on the bulletin boards, filed with the Borough Clerk, and has been sent to the Asbury Park Press and the Star Ledger.
Great, thank you. Can we please have a roll call?
Mayor Kennedy.
Here.
Council President Good.
Here.
Councilmember Pacheco. Councilmember Fotopoulos.
Here.
Councilmember McDermott.
Here.
Councilmember Davidson.
Here.
And Councilmember McNamara.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone can please join me in saluting the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Everyone can remain standing for a moment of silence in honor of their choosing. Thank you. Okay, thank you everyone for attending this evening. This meeting this evening was called so that we could provide or have the consultants and engineers, as well as Mr. Laney, provide an update to the governing body as a full governing body and to the public. Complete Streets has been a topic within the municipality for approximately 8 years now. I know the safety of our streets as far as navigating it as a pedestrian, a bicyclist, or operating a vehicle has been a high priority topic on many different committees in the borough. Several years ago, we started discussing the concept of complete streets, and then we did seek out grants so that we could hire engineers and planning design consultants to see what would who would best serve our municipality as far as options. The committee was derived after the grant was received, and it was focus groups of many different areas. There was the core project team, lots of different project teams, and different members of the community served on each one. But due to the pandemic, we weren't able to have a large council chambers type of meeting like we did when we kicked this off 3 years ago. It was actually February 3 years ago. So the best way to move this forward would be to have the consultants that took all of the survey results that the community participated in, as well as feedback from the different committees, and put a design plan together. But because some of this does touch county roadways, before it can go on to the next step, we needed to have a full review of it by the governing body. So due to timeline, so that we could have this project wrap up in the scheduled amount of time, the only feasible way to do this was to have a special meeting. So thank you everyone for joining this evening. And Jay, did you want to do the introductions, or should I turn it over to Adam? Okay, great. Adam, how you doing?
Good. Thank you all very much for, as the mayor said, taking time. I know this is a special meeting, and coming to listen to this presentation. So I am going to jump right into it and share my screen.
Actually, Adam, sorry, I guess I should just go through how this is going to go. I didn't really go through
Sure.
the format of the meeting. So just for the members that are joining in this evening, Mr. Teska is going to review a bunch of different updates on the entire plan and options. And then after that is done, the governing body can ask questions of the consultants and engineers, and then we'll open it to the floor to any members of the public if there's any remaining questions. Depending on the time frame, we may have to cap the limit of public questions as far as times per each person speaking to make sure we get through if there's still a lot of people left. And if at the end it's still a reasonable amount of time, we can go back to anyone else that has remaining questions. Okay, just wanted to go through the format. Sorry, Adam.
No, absolutely not. I really appreciate that. So thank you all very much for taking the time to come and to listen to this presentation. So I'm going to be sharing my screen here. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Great. I somehow seem to have lost all of you. Here we are. So the agenda for today is I'm going to cover a lot because there's a lot of work that's been done. And what I wanted to do is start with a sort of project overview, foundational work that we go over sort of the work that's been done, the outreach summary, an overview of the work products. And then dive right into some of what we're calling kind of the key recommendations coming out of this plan. There's a lot to digest, and we'll talk about where you're going to be able to see all the things you need to review at the end of this presentation. But I want to kind of hit the highlights. So foundational work. So there are 3 documents that are really worth taking a look at. The first is an existing conditions report. It was published in August of 2020. It is going to be in the set of documents that are going to be available online. And that has got a lot of basically foundational materials and a lot of data in there. There's going to be a review of the existing policies, guidelines, and plans, and a complete streets outreach summary, all of which sort of form the foundation for the work that we're doing. So the existing condition report includes mobility history, demographics, modal analysis, green infrastructure. It's all of the information that you need in order to understand the mobility system in Keyport. The review of existing plans, policies, guides, and plans is really a background documentation on complete streets. And if you are looking to understand sort of the state or the current state of the art of complete streets planning and design and construction, that's the document that you want to go to look at to get that kind of information. And then the third document is a summary of all of the outreach work that we've done. And I'm going to hit on a lot of the findings that are in that report as part of this, but it summarizes the stakeholder meetings, the 262 survey responses that we got to the survey, as well as the feedback from the 103 participants who submitted over 800 responses during the online workshop. That information also, or embedded in that, is also information from 4 technical advisory committee meetings that we've had throughout this project. So there's a lot of really good information in all 3 of those documents. Just a sample of the kind of information that you might find in the outreach summary, for example, is what I like to call is a really great comparison here between what is the modal split to work. And so what we're looking here is census data that says about 2% of Keyport residents as part of the census identified, or excuse me, as part of the American Community Survey, identified that they walked to work. And if you work really only on that data, you might say, oh, walking's really not that important. We probably shouldn't be investing a lot of time and resources into improving the walking network in in Keyport. But, you know, when we look at the survey responses, we find that more than 50% of respondents are walking to access what we're defining as an essential service. And so that's things like going to the pharmacy, going to the grocery store, going to a house of worship. So what that really starts to highlight is that people are walking a lot to do a lot of what I call non-economic activity, but still activity that's really important to maintaining a high quality of life. You know, that in that report, it breaks down the sort of different locations that people or different services or people are accessing, and walking to park or an open space. Basically 3 in 4 residents are walking to a park at least half the time that they go. And that's really critical to understand, because access to open spaces currently, especially in this time now, is really critical. Another thing that you're going to find in those reports are, for those of you who participated in the workshop, sort of the evaluation of streets in Keyport based on sort of public feedback. And what you can see here is, and not to a lot of people's surprise, I assume in this meeting, is that generally speaking, there aren't a lot of great streets where people feel like, hey, these are great streets to walk and bike. It's not that they're necessarily all terrible streets, but very few streets got really high ratings, and quite a number of streets got pretty poor ratings, in fact. And this is, again, resident feedback on the quality of the experience of walking and biking on this street. So we think this public engagement effort really demonstrates and really helps to build a foundation for the reasons why complete streets are so important in Keyport. In response to some questions about how streets could be used going forward as a result of COVID-19, sort of what are the lessons that have been learned? We got a lot of really good feedback. These are some quotes. I won't read them all directly, but there were a lot of comments about the desire to see outside dining continue, making sure that connections to the Henry Hudson Trail were really important, and that the parking could be an issue, and that, you know, if you're going to use streets for outdoor space, but connecting to the trail and the trail to downtown could help maybe ameliorate some of those concerns. So all really good feedback throughout the process. In addition to some of that work, there were a lot of, especially in the workshop, location-specific activities, which I'm going to highlight actually as we get into each of those streets and each of those street typologies. So before we get into the actual draft recommendations, I do want to kind of give everybody a top-level overview of the products that we're going to be creating. And these are the tools that you'll be using to help implement complete streets. So there are 4 documents. There's a ordinance, which includes a policy, and there's a complete streets design guide, an implementation guide, and then a review of the land use and subdivision ordinance. And I will be going through each of those in a little bit more detail. So the ordinance makes a complete streets the official policy of the borough. It establishes the design guide as the official regulating document. It establishes the Complete Streets Complete Streets Advisory Committee, and it outlines a lot of processes for public participation, project prioritization, exemptions, and reporting. And again, this is a document that the council especially should take some time with, because ultimately the expectation is that this will be adopted. And it really sets the framework for the rest of the documents that are coming after that. Then there's the design guide. And this is what I'd call the sort of meat and potatoes of the work that we're doing. And I will talk a little bit more about what's included in that, but basically it establishes design guidance for all the streets, existing and any future streets that might come. It includes bike and pedestrian network maps, and provides guidance on design tools. So bulb outs, bicycle parking, mid-block crossings, like how should those be designed? And it also identifies priority interventions on every street typology. So these are 3 maps. They're all drafts at this point, but the first one is going to be the street typology map, and that basically helps you identify what typology applies to what street. And I'll get into what a typology is in a minute. There's also a priority bike map, which can really be seen as sort of the bike network map, and then a priority pedestrian map. And these are streets which have been identified as places where there's probably high volumes or should be high volumes of pedestrian traffic, and therefore should get enhanced treatments because of their particular role in the pedestrian network. So when we're looking at street typology, so going back, there's this street typology. And as you can see, every street in the borough will be assigned a street typology. And the typology is really a sort of generic. It provides general design guidance for all streets that are in that group. And the way that I kind of make the analogy for those of you who are familiar with sort of the way zoning works is a zone gives you sort of the use regulations and the bulk standards for every parcel in that zone. That doesn't mean that every parcel in that zone is exactly the same, and it doesn't mean that every parcel in that zone has to be built exactly the same way, but there are sort of general guidelines or directions on that. And she just turned on her camera and I just jumped into it. So I just want to take a quick pause and introduce Hannah Brockhouse, who is on the call with us today and has been working diligently with my team here at FHI on this project. So she may be chiming in here, and I don't want anybody to be surprised. So the street, or excuse me, each typology will include a sort of graphic vision of how the street should be designed, a narrative description of sort of what the goals and objectives of the street are, sort of the vision for the street. A set of design standards, really talking about the street in cross-section. A number of design tools, identifying here, as you can say, required tools, high priority, moderate priority, and low priority tools. And then some background information that will help during implementation, including why this design was selected and what are some additional considerations that need to be taken in on specific streets throughout the borough. In addition to that, there's going to be a whole section where we give really specific guidance to things like how to install bike parking, what are the types that should be used, where should they be located, how much passage space needs to be given off of sidewalks. Same thing with bulb out and curb extensions, sort of design guidance, where they're applicable, what street typologies are they applicable to, sort of the pros and cons of using it. So giving you a lot of guidance and a lot of information that is tied back, as I say, to each street typology in the design guide. The next big sort of deliverable or report is the implementation guide. And that's really going to identify sort of the implementation strategy, project deliverable pathways, how to prioritize projects, giving you a lot of detail on sort of what to do now that you've got this design guide and this ordinance. How do you actually make this happen in a sustainable way? And then one of the tests that we were asked to do was to look at the land use and subdivision ordinance and provide any direction or suggestions on modifications to that ordinance that might support complete streets. So all of that is addressed in this land use and subdivision review report. And as you might expect, it addresses a lot of parking considerations, bicycle parking considerations, talking about a complete streets checklist. And doesn't really get into the uses that are there. And we really saw that as sort of outside the domain of this project. So before I jump into the rest of the work, there's some real disclaimers that I want to put on everything that I'm going to show today. The first and foremost is this is a planning document. It's not an engineering document. What we feel is that everything that we're going to be presenting is very feasible, but that doesn't mean that you can just go out and build all of this tomorrow. There's still a whole, design and construction process that would happen at every street that would include preliminary and final design, potentially traffic analysis, impact studies, and certainly public information sections. So there's a lot more work before everything is sorted out on the ground, but this gives you a huge head start in that process. Everything that I'm presenting is draft right now and is open to modification. And with respect to county facilities, it's really important to understand that we're still doing sort of cross coordination with the county right now. So everything is still very much in the air with the county. We can't commit that there's any sort of support for any of these concepts from the county at this point in time. And as a result of that, that coordination, it is possible that there are changes that could come out of that work with the county that we don't know yet. We have a lot of faith in the work that we put together, but as I'm sure many of you know, working with the county requires a lot of sort of back and forth, and they have their own concerns and issues that we're going to need to be able to address as part of that. So that's a lot of background. And I'm moving very fast because I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but now we're really jumping into the recommendations. So the first thing that I want to show you is the bike network. This is the draft bike network. And as you can see, one thing that is very different about this than what you currently have is there's actually a bike network. Keyport doesn't have that right now, and what we've identified is, really a pair of bike lanes on Broad and Main Street, and then really substantial cross-borough connections on Maple and 3rd Street that really helps to leverage the Henry Hudson Trail. And then a number of shared bike streets on sort of critical roadways that may not be large enough right now to accommodate a full bicycle facility, but we think could provide safe spaces for bicyclists to move through the borough. Also a priority pedestrian network. Again, Broad and Main, a lot of north-south movements there. Also identifying Maple Street as priority pedestrian streets. Again, these are all streets that would carry high levels of traffic. So it's not to suggest that other streets wouldn't be used by pedestrians, but just these would be the higher volume or more important pedestrian streets. So Broad and Main Street, as many of you know, there has been a discussion for a while about a one-way pair on Broad and Main Street that would create the opportunity, for enhanced bicycle facilities. So as part of the workshop, which I know a number of you participated in, we put out 3 concepts for that: a sort of standard bike lane, a protected bike lane, and a cycle track option. There was really strong support for both the protected bike lane and the cycle track. So down here, green is to sort of very strongly support, moderate support, and this sort of dark orange is strongly disagree, and the light orange is sort of moderate disagreement. So as you can see, there's actually considerable support for those 2 options, not a lot of support for sort of a standard bike lane. And as we dug into this in a little bit more detail, we really saw the protected bike lane as the best option for a number of reasons, including a number of sort of technical reasons. So we started developing that concept, and this is going to be a lot to look at all at once, I know. But this is the first draft of the typology that would regulate that area. And so I'll just walk you through it. So this is not any specific street along there. It's a sort of a generic street along Broad or along Main Street. And what you have is a wide bicycle lane. one side of parking and one through lane. The bicycle lane would have bicycle protection, which you can start to see a little bit down here in this cross section. So that cross section is happening along here. As you move sort of down into the intersection, what we're showing is how you would make this turn. So if this were, for example, a shared bicycle lane, you could make this turn here. And then what we're showing is as you get sort of closer to the downtown, there's probably going to be a need to increase the amount of parking on the street relative to sort of the bicycle infrastructure. So things sort of become a two-sided parking lane with one through traffic, and then a narrow bicycle lane in that direction. And that's what you're seeing down here. So there's two sides of parking, a drive lane, and then a narrower bicycle facility there. So the other topic that came up or issue that we were looking at was 3rd Street, how to make this east-west connection sort of closer to 1st Street. And we put out as part of the workshop this, leaving 1st Street as two-way, leaving 2nd Street as two-way, and really converting 3rd Street to a two-way bicycle facility and a one-way eastbound drive lane. And this is sort of the cross section that was shown at that. There was incredible support from the people who participated in the workshop. Lots of yeses, or some yeses with some changes, but just, love it. It's simple and makes sense. This is a fabulous idea. We need more bike paths and less on-street parking. I love this proposal. I thought this comment was really good that, it may cause some inconveniences to residents. And so, there's going to need to be engagement with people who live on that street. We certainly agree with that. So this is sort of an example of how the typologies work. That same typology that I showed you on Broad and Main Street applies also to 3rd Street. But because the standards are flexible, they're going to allow for a context-based approach. So you're not going to have two sides of parking. It'd really be one side of parking. And this bicycle lane actually would likely be a sort of standard bicycle lane, or would be two there. So there's lots of opportunity here to customize these standards to the specific conditions on the ground. So the next place that we want to get into is Maple Place. So as many of you saw in the workshop, Maple Place is really a wide street that's significantly underutilized right now. There's about 22 feet that's dedicated to travel lanes, and that's has to be there. But the rest of it, 24 feet in some places and more in others, is really underutilized or unused. And so what we ask people is, how would you allocate that unused space to stormwater management and bike lanes, to parking and bike lanes? What would be the breakup of that? And what we found is that there was a lot of support for sort of parking, stormwater management, and bike lanes, or stormwater management and bike lanes, but very little support for just parking and stormwater management, or parking and bike lanes. And as a result of that, we can sort of infer that biking is a priority, that stormwater management is as important as parking, if not more important, to those who responded to these questions. And respondents preferred a balanced approach, and we think that that's actually the right path forward on Maple Place. So just going back to this bike network map, as you can see, Maple Place is this really critical east-west connection across the borough. It's one of the few places where we think you can sort of make a connection from the areas west of the waterways to the sort of the area east, and get people from sort of this side of the borough into the sort of center and up and down Main and Broad Street. So it's a really critical connection here. And what we're going to put out there is a number of different options that you can kind of mix and match. So what this is and what we're showing here is what we're calling a paint only option. And so in this option, bicyclists are actually in the center of the road, and parking is actually in the center of the road. And one of the big reasons for that is that there are all of these driveways along the Maple Place. And so if you have bike lanes in front of those driveways, you've got cars pulling in and out of those driveways, and that makes it more dangerous. It creates more opportunities for conflicts with bicyclists. And if you put it in the center of the road, they basically have an unobstructed stretch every block where they don't have to worry about cars cutting across their direction. So that's sort of shown down here in section. You can see sort of one-way driving, another way of either sort of parking or a turn lane, and then another, and then another drive lane here. This can be enhanced with just sort of simple paint that can really, I'm sure many of you have seen this, sort of green paint on the ground, which really helps to identify that as bike-only spaces. Another reason why we're looking at it in the center is because there's an opportunity to also potentially raise the curb. That would create an even more protection for bicyclists in those areas, because they're actually up above the surface of the road, as it would be, or the drive lane road. The way we've drawn it and how we would recommend it is that the curbs aren't sort of vertical. They're actually have what's called a mountable curb. So if a car was broke down on the street here, or an emergency vehicle needed to get past, they could actually pop up over that curb and go on their way without having to go over like a full significant curve. The nice thing about an option like this is it also allows for the inclusion of stormwater management in the center of the street. And that was another reason why in the paint only option, we had talked about this in the center, was because there's an opportunity to include really large sections of stormwater management on Maple Place. And because the borough is struggling a lot with flooding and stormwater issues, we wanted to make sure that we address this as part of the Complete Streets Plan. And these kinds of larger stormwater management systems can be really effective at essentially slowing the rate of water into your current stormwater management system, which gives your system and the pumps and all of that time to process the water. So it essentially allows you to maximize or extend the time in which your current system has to process water, which makes it so that your current system can actually work effectively, which it does most of the time. It's only during high volume events that it becomes a problem. So that's what's shown here. And the reason, again, for putting this in the center is you can create these large systems, whereas if you put it on the side of the road, you essentially have to break it up every time there's a driveway, and there are a lot of driveways along the road. The most important thing about this solution is this paint option that we're showing can very easily be a phase one to this, and all of these options, the paint option, the raised curb, and the stormwater management system, can be mixed and matched based on sort of the conditions and the funding that's available when you go to implement it. So one of the things in our early conversations with the county is they pointed us to this Route 524 project, which is out near Freehold. And the important thing about this is a county project. They're doing a new roadway system, and it includes 3 stormwater management basins, median bioswales, which is what we're proposing, and infiltration basins. And we've got some questions to them about maintenance, cost, and project benefits. So sort of how much water they're actually able to address as part of this. But our understanding is that the county is going to be maintaining the stormwater management system as part of this project. And we think that's important because we understand there's some concerns at the local level about who would maintain this kind of system. And then finally, there's a demonstration project, which is coming up this spring. Today was a really beautiful day out today, and felt like spring is finally maybe in sight, not here yet, but coming. And so we're going to be doing a demonstration project on Maple, Church, and Atlantic. We're going to really show what redesigning of this intersection could look like, and how it could improve pedestrian and bicycle movements through the area, as well as make it a safer place to drive and move through. So that's going to be a temporary project. It's going to be really with paint and temporary materials, and it'll be up for a week or until it rains. The paint that we use washes away in the rain, and if it rains, the county's asked that we go out and sort of take down everything. So we're working on getting an actual date for that, but that is going to be coming before the end of this project. So I promise 2 minutes away from the end of my presentation, and then we can get into the fun discussion part of all of this. So next steps, the public and council have documents that they can review. There are these 4 documents: the Complete Streets Ordinance, the Implementation Guide, the Land Use and Subdivision Review, and the Outreach Summary. All of those are on the borough website or can be downloaded at keyportstreets.com. Those are up now if you want to download them. Please send all your comments to Jay, the borough administrator, at administrator@keyportonline.com by Monday, March 22nd at 9 a.m. That's about 2 weeks for you to review that. We think that's sufficient time. Some of them are pretty heavy documents, so I don't suggest you try to do them all at once, but I think you can get through them in that time frame. We're going to be meeting with the county and getting some feedback from them. The design guide is not yet public and is not yet in draft form because we are still waiting on those meetings with the county in order to be able to release that. So if you're looking for like what's going to happen on my street, that isn't ready yet, and we will be notifying everybody when that document is ready for review. So that's it. I think I did it in about 32 minutes, 34 minutes. I tried to stay in 30 minutes, but I did want to make sure I got as much information to all of you as possible, because I really do appreciate all the time that you're taking to listen to this. And I will hand this back to the mayor, and I'll follow your direction.
Great. Adam, that was great. Thank you very much. And as he indicated, for follow-up, it'll be available on the borough website, and any comments or feedback after this evening can be addressed to Mr. Delaney. So first, I would like to have the governing body comments or questions. I'll start with Council President Good.
Mayor, you know what, this is just a lot of information. So I haven't exactly, actually, no, I do have at least one question. The raised curves and the stormwater on Maple, what would be the cost of the borough? Or have we figured out the cost of the borough for all of these changes?
Yeah, that's a great question. There, as part of this project, we're not looking at cost estimation for this, and that's part of the reason why we wanted to include a paint-only option. We think that, you know, very clearly it's not going to be cheap. and that it's a significant investment. We do think that there's opportunity to coordinate with the county on this. There are also grants that are out there that can help support this. The other thing that I think it's really important to keep in mind here is, this needs to be put in context also with investments in gray infrastructure that your borough is going to need to do in order to address some of the county, or excuse me, to some of the flooding issues. And so, there is, my understanding is some concerns about the pump station on Maple Place. I know there's flooding downtown. We would really recommend that sort of before this work was done, that a comprehensive stormwater management plan was undertaken to really evaluate the impact that a intervention like this could have, and to evaluate some of the sort of cost benefits against what I would call more gray infrastructure investments.
I maybe I missed this point earlier, but how many people responded to the I guess all of the questions, a couple of the charts you put up?
Yeah, so there were 260 people responded to the survey, and then 108 people registered for the workshop. And those 108 people gave approximately 800 points of feedback throughout the process.
Did you have a chance to maybe you did or didn't, the 260 people who responded to the survey, did you map those people to where they possibly live in the borough with regard to some of these changes?
We didn't. We didn't ask people to identify their location or where they lived. But what we did do is everybody who participated in the survey received multiple invitations to participate in the workshop and to identify some of the location-specific recommendations that were most important to them.
I think that's all I have now, Mayor. I might have something later, but I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Fotopoulos?
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, everybody, for all the work you've done throughout. I'm gonna hold off comment for the moment.
Thank you. I did not see Councilwoman Pacheco join yet. Is that correct, Michelle?
She has not.
Okay. I just want to make sure I wasn't missing her on the grid. Councilwoman McDermott?
Yeah. So my question is in regards to Maple Place, the bridge. When you guys say you're going all the way up to Maple Street, there is a bridge there that has consistent flooding. It's a bridge, but everyone knows the county doesn't recognize it as a bridge. And the other side too is we have, when you look at even 3rd Street, there's some areas that have, I would say, excess water and stuff. So what are you going to do with the area of those streets? Because we're not going to have storm drain maintenance there. Like, for example, on 3rd Street, that's going to be a little bit issue. And also in those major construction areas, we have to lift streets. What's the time span of doing that project in comparison to the quick fix painting?
Yeah, I think those are really great questions. So, we know that there are sort of localized, I'll address each of them maybe in reverse order, if you don't mind. We know that there are localized flooding issues on 3rd Street and sort of all through the area, basically from Maple Place all the way to the Bayfront. I mean, we know that there are localized flooding issues along there. And one of the things that we have tried to include in this are essentially opportunities to do small rain gardens that would allow you to collect those sort of like local flooding issues without necessarily having to tie that street into the entire stormwater management system, if that makes if that makes sense. Those all come with a cost, but again, we think that those are much smaller interventions. And I'm actually going to share my screen really quickly. And so I can just show you an example of where we've done that. So what we're showing here, and we've shown them. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen yet. Now I am. What we're showing here, and I haven't highlighted these out, are essentially rain gardens. And what we see is possible in a lot of places is to actually bump out the curb to shorten the crossing walk distance and create space for things like stormwater management. So we're identifying that as an opportunity. You know, that's going to be something, getting back to the idea of like, you know, once you actually get to the design of 3rd Street, you're going to have to get into the nitty gritty of where that's possible. But we do see opportunities sort of along that corridor for that to happen. I just want to see if Hannah wants to add anything to that conversation.
Right. So the only thing I'll add is that curb extensions, you know, the benefit of having this long-term plan for a street like 3rd Street is that you look at the corridor as a whole and figure out where, if you were going to put bike lanes on the street, where they would be, so they wouldn't conflict with you putting in a curb extension now. And so then you can get localized funding or grant funding now for a curb extension to address the stormwater without conflicting with long-term goals for the street.
And just one more question. One of the other things is we also have a commuting hub. So we have a bus terminal that's on Green Grove, and then we also have that goes all the way up to Hazlitt and actually extends out to Aberdeen. Is there long-term conversations to bridge that as well in with this complete streets so that people can bike or walk to the train station / bus stations? And I know it's going to take a connection with the other towns and things like that, but
Yeah,
the long.
I was going to say, Hannah, do you want to?
Right, I'll take that one. So we did look at the overall, like the transit connectivity and how to make those connections. And we raised that in conversations with the county and also with New Jersey Transit, if I'm not mistaken. We had a stakeholder conversation with them very early on. And so part of the kind of things that we're informing our decisions about what those priority walking networks was really about those connectivity, the connectivity to the transit. And similarly with the bike network, the same thing. We're envisioning the Henry Hudson Trail as an additional link to that. And we raised kind of conversations with the county for Aberdeen Station, making that connection to get that seamless connection to Aberdeen Station. But those walking and biking networks along Green Grove, along Broad and Main to get to Hazlitt, and along the trail and down Maple Place to get to Aberdeen are critical, we think.
And just this seems to be like that focus on the downtown area. Are we also going to eventually talk about like the commercial area on 35, 36, bridging those residential zones in with this as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that all of that is sort of taken into account in this sort of, hopefully in this sort of organization. I apologize. I was doing a delicate balance here of trying to zoom in on this map and being able to show everything. And I cut off sort of the other side of 36, but we really see this as sort of an important connection over here, and as well sort of coming over the bridge and getting over to that area. I mean, as I'm sure you're aware, these are really complicated areas across here. And we do think that there might be an opportunity to potentially put a sort of shared use trail or path that's sort of a biking and walking on that bridge. We've looked at it, but that's really going to be something that you're going to have to coordinate, with the state on, and it's a difficult, and excuse me, in the county on, because it's a difficult crossing. But we certainly tried to look at solutions for that.
Right. The other thing I'm just going to quickly note is that in our existing conditions report, because we were doing this, in the early days of the pandemic, we were really focusing on those essential services and the access that is provided to a grocery store, for example, and how you get there if you're on foot. And so that really informed a lot of our conversations early, and we mapped out all of those as kind of essential destinations in our existing conditions report. And there's a lot of detail in there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Davidson?
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation, Adam. I have a whole bunch of questions, so bear with me as I go through them with you. So Adam, you were saying that the percentages that you have in the presentation were based on 262 responses, is that correct?
Yes. You're talking about the walking responses?
Yeah, wherever you showed a percentage within your presentation, 2080, those were all based on just 262 responses.
Yes, they were based on 262 survey responses. So the sort of accessing essential services, yes.
Okay. As far as Maple Place goes, and well, let me start with Broad Street. I would like to see, and I know it's just a draft, but it was, I thought, a primary focus to provide pathways for everybody walking to and from schools, and I didn't really see much of a focus on that specifically. So if I missed that, I apologize, but I think that's a really important fact of making sure that's clearly defined and how it's going to make it better for everybody walking their children to school, as we live in a walking district, as you know, for schools.
Yeah. I mean, I will say we put in a considerable amount of thought into that, and I apologize if that didn't come through in the presentation. So, our logic moving through all of this and sort of my understanding of the history of complete streets in the borough in a lot of ways, started looking at that space in front of the school where there's the mid-block crossing and the loading and the pickup and what was going on there. And as we sort of dug into all of that, that is where we started to really see in our perspective, the big benefits of doing a one-way pair on Broad and Main. And in the existing conditions report, we've talked about that, and we're going to be talking about that in the report itself or in the design guide as well. If I can share my screen really quickly for you, I can just sort of walk everybody through this. And I do want to take a moment to talk about this because I do know how important it is. So the school is right here on this map, and this is the bike networking map. And one of the things we think is really great about this pair is that if and as the network gets built out, really any student in the entire borough will have less than 2 blocks that they would need to ride on a bike where they wouldn't be on some sort of bicycle facility in order to access the school. So, if you're over in this section of the area of the borough, you can really quickly move up and get on the Henry Hudson Trail, come up Main Street, and either cut across on Jackson here and cycle back and get to school without any problems, or sort of kind of come up and cycle back this way. Likewise, people who live over here, we think Washington Street is a really interesting street to do a shared facility. It's a really low-key facility. You can really quickly move up, get on the Maple Place bike, and then come in on Main Street and cycle back in. So there's really been an attempt to try and as much as possible provide bicycle connections to the school. And then when it came to priority pedestrian networks, we wanted to make sure that all of the areas where you would access the school, so really Atlantic Street and Broad Street from the pedestrian perspective, were identified as priority pedestrian networks. And what that would mean is that, for example, at intersections, you would have higher quality crosswalks that would create more visibility for students as they're crossing the way. There's a potential for raised crosswalks, which would provide even more support there. And we wanted to make sure that that connection was always there. And, quite frankly, we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just about getting to school, that students after school could go downtown to the riverfront, could get to the parks, could do things that students do after school, other than, maybe I was the only one who didn't go straight home and do homework, but wanted to hang out with their friends at different places. But make sure that they could do that without having to get picked up in a car and driven there by their parents. So sorry for the long-winded response, but I did want to make sure we touched on that.
Thank you for going back through that then. So then moving on to Maple Place. There's the, as you know, from Beer Street between Beers and La Patatong, there's a bridge that dips down. In your conversations with the county, has that been discussed with lifting that bridge? And then if it is lifted, what happens with the tractor trailers? Because for me, I live directly on Maple Place, and tractor trailers come flying by all the time, generally speeding. And a huge concern of mine is having pedestrians and bicyclists would be in the middle of Maple Place, not to mention now they have to worry about heavy traffic going from both directions, the few intersections we have, as well as people backing in and out of their driveways. And yes, the street is wide, but for people that drive larger vehicles, backing in and out on a 90-degree angle to get into your driveway, that doesn't seem like enough space to actually turn your vehicles in safely while worrying about pedestrians and traffic and parked cars all in the same area. So I guess, what has the county said so far about tractor trailers and removing them?
Yeah, we haven't had those conversations with the county. The county has identified this as a truck route and has, continued to say that this will, from our understanding, has been a truck route. We can raise that question again and see to understand why Maple Place is a truck route and see if there's any give on that. But, to be honest, I think that's something that is going to need to be a continuing conversation between the borough and the county after the end of this project. With respect to truck traffic on Maple Place and sort of the recommendations that we're putting in here, it's my professional opinion that the recommendations that we're making would significantly slow down traffic through this area. Part of the reason why you can speed down Maple Place is you basically have, 30 feet of drive lane where there's no friction whatsoever. There's nothing to stop you from going as fast as you want to go along there. And especially if you're an 18-wheeler tractor trailer. And so interestingly, one of the sort of case studies that we're looking at for this is a street in Philadelphia, which is where I live, where they took essentially what is an industrial street that is very rapidly becoming residential because of changes in demographic in the city, and did this same intervention. And I can tell you from personal experience, it's the equivalent of what happens when you fertilize land. People are out walking there. People are out riding their bikes there because traffic is significantly slower along there. I stopped the other day to watch a tractor trailer make the turn, and it was really interesting to watch the tractor trailer driver basically have to slow to a creep in order to make the turn because it was tighter, because he couldn't just zoom on and go wherever the truck wanted to go. They had to slow down. And we think that this sort of center median approach is safer for people pulling in and out of their driveways and safer for people who are riding their bikes on the street.
Okay. the rain gardens that you're proposing in the drawings there, that they're on the corners of the intersections, what kind of plants would be there, and would those pose any sort of visibility issues making the turn?
No, this is a really common approach that's been used across the country at this point in time and throughout New Jersey to bring sort of localized stormwater solutions in areas where it's appropriate. So they're usually I admit I'm not a stormwater management expert, but the person in our office who I consulted about called them woody plants. And if you go out, I can send some pictures if you would like. You can go out and look at them. They look like, you know, plants that you would plant in your garden, but they don't rise up above, you know, a foot above the ground. And the important thing is to understand how these are structured. They're actually constructed below the surface level of the street so that water can run into them. So they're actually sort of sunken down. Can actually, yeah.
Okay. And then if that project does happen, who would be responsible for maintaining them? So if a resident lives on a corner where you have that, and is that, you know, the resident's job to maintain them, the town, the county? Is the county, how would that work?
Depending on the jurisdiction of the street, if they were borough streets, it would be the responsibility of the borough to maintain them. You know, in a lot of ways, the maintenance on these is seasonal, obviously. My understanding is that there's a rain garden that's currently on the Bayfront, on the Bayfront Park. That's beautiful. I went out and looked at it, and my understanding is it's maintained by the garden club. That is a very effective sort of mechanism for maintaining those. If you were to expand and grow these kinds of installations, it would be something that you might want to look at more sort of professional effort, but it's not something that is beyond the capability of a borough of your size.
Okay, I don't believe that the rain gardens on the waterfront are actually maintained anymore by the garden club. I'm not quite sure who it is. I don't believe it's them, but we could get that question answered later.
Okay, I may be misinformed.
That's okay. I might be as well. So, and my concern with them being on the county road is if the borough is going to take manpower and stuff of that sort. So, while I appreciate all the work and the effort that went into this, and I'm sure it's a wonderful project, I have a lot of concerns about the Maple Place area specifically. So anyway, but thank you so much. And I'm sure I'll have many more questions that I'll forward to Jay.
Yeah, I 100% understand your concerns. You know, we do think that the solutions that we're putting forward here are going to make or would make Maple Place significantly safer and a better place for people to walk and to bike. But I understand your concern, and you know, I think it is important to acknowledge that what we're putting out here is a vision. It is something that will need to be tested and evaluated and examined in more detail. And there are going to be things that are going to need to be worked out with the county before anything can move forward. So thank you for your questions.
Les, perhaps when you speak to the county, maybe ask them if they raise that bridge, if once they raise it, they put a ton limit on it, and that would maybe give us the opportunity to remove tractor trailers from Maple Place. So just a thought.
Yeah, that could be a very interesting, and I will say this, that, you know, something like raising the bridge could be a project that would pair with improvements to Maple Place, that if you wanted to sort of think about those as joint efforts, especially since Maple Place the bridge there experiences flooding, and that's something to think about.
Thank you again.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilwoman McNamara?
Thank you. Adam, I also look at Philly regularly as an idea generator for what we could have. My daughter lives there, so
Oh, great.
I'm a big fan of all the four-way stops and 25 mile an hour. I see that as a possibility that we could have here that would really slow a lot of things down in the areas away from the county roads. So I guess a couple of my questions are, I'm assuming you folks have been involved with other communities in New Jersey, hopefully in Monmouth County, you have these relationships. How have they taken this ordinance, if they've adopted it? Do they fold it into their master plan?
Great question. So the ordinance is something that council adopts. So it is exactly the same as a noise ordinance or any other ordinance that council would adopt. And when you read it, you'll see it basically sets out a series of procedures that the borough should undertake in order to implement complete streets. And it establishes the design guide as a sort of preferred design standards for all of the streets in the borough. We also think that it would be wise to adopt the design guide as part of your master plan. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is because it has a relationship with the capital improvement plan, and having that as sort of the foundation for the capital improvement plan recommendations is valuable. But it also is important because it will create a foundation for private changes to the roadway system. So an example of this may be, let's say a developer comes in and wants to redevelop, let's say 100 feet of frontage along a street. According to our plan and according to the standards we put out there, we've recommended that we've required that the sidewalk be 6 feet wide. And so that would establish that requirement and that obligation by the developer to build a 6 foot wide sidewalk. Under the sort of ADA regulations, they could build a 4 foot sidewalk. And that's how you get what you've sort of got in Keyport right now, which is, you can't pass anybody on the sidewalks, or somebody, somebody on a wheelchair is, in the street because the sidewalk gets too narrow and can't get by. So there's a lot of reasons to adopt this as part of the master plan as well.
So I guess as a follow-up to that, have you been able to ascertain higher success rates with communities that do like fold it in?
Yeah, so a good document to review as part of that is the previous plans, policies, and procedures, and that really talks about the sort of state of the art of complete streets planning. And the complete streets ordinance really came about because there was a feeling from a lot of people who were working to implement complete streets that you'd sort of say, yes, complete streets, we think this is good, this is part of our master plan, but there was nothing that was really sort of holding the borough accountable and saying, this is the policy, this is what we are trying to build. And the design guidelines sort of took that a step further and said, no, it's not just about like, yes, we want bike lanes, it's here's where we want the bike lanes, here's how they should be designed, here's how the sidewalk should be designed. And so this is really the culmination in a lot of ways of the collective of experience, decades of experience of other communities, and sort of the work that they've done and lessons that they've learned.
My next conversation has to do with the county, which I live on Broadway, so that's a county road. So I'm familiar with some of the things that come and go with being part of that. And we have, because of our history, a lot of county roads for a very small town. And I guess my concern is it seems like we don't fully have buy-in from the county. I'm curious what you think are the issues or concerns from the county with giving us support on this.
So I will say this, the county has been, was and continues to be great with respect to the demonstration project. We brought them a demonstration project that contained elements that they had never done before. They had not implemented. They have not done a demonstration project on a county street in all of Monmouth County, and they were open to this. I not to pat the person who writes my paychecks on the back, but NJTPA and Keith was instrumental in their role and sort of the bridge between the county and the local municipalities and sort of bringing them to the table. My honest opinion, and knowing that this is being recorded, is that all of this is very new to a lot of people, and that the county wants to make sure that they're doing the right thing, and that they're not going to construct anything where somebody's going to get hurt. They're not going to construct anything where they're going to get, have any issues coming forward. And so, again, my experience has been that coordinating with them just requires a lot of conversation, making sure that your sort of ducks are in a line when you have those conversations, making sure you're able to justify why you're asking for what you're asking for. And they've been amenable to the conversations, but this is all very new to them as well. And so I think keeping that in mind is going to be an important part of it, and understanding that it will likely be lots and lots of conversations to make anything.
Okay, two other.
Adam, if I could piggyback off of that, Councilman McDermott and Adam, that's actually one of the reasons we're having this meeting as well, right? So the county was amenable to the suggestion of the demonstration project, which will be on for council vote for approval next week at the council meeting. But as far as this entire project design plan as a whole, that's why one of the reasons this meeting needs to take place, so that you guys all saw it, and then they can continue, if you guys agree, with dialogue with the county about all the different other aspects of the possibilities. So saying that the county doesn't have buy-in on it, I think that may be more of the TAP program, Councilman McNamara, that you're referring to. The council hasn't really seen this whole plan, correct, Adam?
Yes, that's correct. So we're still in conversations with them, and need to, as the mayor said, make sure that the borough is interested in having, advancing these conversations with the county, and then moving that forward.
I just wanted to, because I know there's multiple projects out in the municipality right now. There's the TAP program, and then there's the Complete Streets program, and some other ones. So this one has not been frowned upon by the county yet, because they really haven't seen it, only just the demonstration project that he was talking about by Cornucopia, which they did give the go-ahead approval for if we vote on it next week.
So the county hasn't seen any of the other items except for this demonstration program? They haven't seen Maple, they haven't seen this 3rd Street, they haven't seen any of the other stuff?
We've had conversations with the county throughout this process. Again, NJTPA is, played a very important role in connecting us. And Dave Schmederer, who's part of the county planning division, not county engineering, and it's an important distinction, is on the technical advisory committee, and so has been part of all the conversations that we've had. We had a meeting with the county when the workshop was out, and we sat down and walked through all of the workshop activities that were relevant to county facilities, and basically had personal conversations with them and said, what about this concerns you? What would you like to know? What would you like to have bring more on there? And as a sort of example of that, one of the concerns that the county had when we talked about Maple Place was the turning movements in and out of driveways and how that would work. And they said, how would it work, with a median, and what would that look like? And, these are just questions for us to consider as we're going forward. They weren't looking for direct answers there. And that's actually why we went to Philadelphia to look at that example, was because it's also a center median example, and it showed that, there are lots of places, and if you think about it, it makes sense, where you basically don't turn left mid-street. You turn left at the end of the street, and we were sort of able to demonstrate that's possible. There were a number of other things. They were the one who pointed us to that 524 project, because we were talking about stormwater, and we just asked them if they did any sort of stormwater projects on any of their streets. So I would not say that they have not seen anything. I would say that we've been in conversation with them through this whole process.
Okay, that was, to me, a whole bunch of, you've had conversations. You showed us I'm going to stick with Maple Place here. You showed us Maple Place. It had a paint only option, a raised curb, and stormwater. Have you showed those pictures to anybody in the county? Hey, these are the plans. We're thinking about it.
So my understanding is that the intent was to come to this body first and to have a conversation with this body about whether or not this body wanted to advance those conversations, and that was the the county needed to know that this body was interested in those ideas before. Mayor, maybe you can help
Sure.
explain.
Sure. So all the complete street committees are advisory committees. None of them have authority to move things forward. So just as council committees, they're advisory committees. Once they got to this point, I think it would have been disrespectful for the county to be reviewing plans that our governing body hadn't even seen yet, or knew were even being discussed, or any of the committee members that served on this for the last several months. So just like we would move anything forward before county spent any time looking at a plan that perhaps our governing body wasn't in favor of, I think the correct protocol would be for the governing body to say yes, see if the county's even on board with this or not. So that way communication's not going to county and bypassing the dais. So that is where this meeting came about, so that you guys could see it and say, okay, sure, move this forward and see what they come back with. Maybe they're going to come back with no. Maybe they'll come back with, hey, we want to start this as a project, as an initial thing throughout the whole county. So maybe Keyport will be maybe they'll fund it for us. Who knows? But I don't think it was appropriate to, as an advisory committee, to move something forward to county and bypass our dais.
I'm not talking about anything. My apologies if it came out wrong, but my question, I guess, goes towards, you're having conversations, and Adam, I guess this is directed towards you. You're having conversations with the county. Maybe this wasn't a formal submission, but were there any kind of, call it informal discussions? Hey, we're thinking of, this, has this been something that can give at least this dais an idea of, if we spend some time going through this and having all these people here, that it actually has a chance of moving forward? Or is this, we could be spinning our wheels here for a long time, and you know what, the county wouldn't even be close to being interested in any of this? Nothing like a plan, but something maybe on an informal.
Let me answer that very specifically. That I think Broad and Main Street, and Main Street is yours, Broad Street. There have been previous conversations about this that the county is aware of. The level of intervention is significantly less. It's a less complex sort of environment, quite frankly. And there's a really strong justification for it around the schools and sort of the work that the borough has already done. I think that they would be open to it. We brought this up early in the conversation with our stakeholder meetings with the county, and had that conversation. So I do not think you would be spinning your wheels moving that conversation forward. We think it has a lot of merit. And I think that, again, it'll be a lot of conversations, but I think there's opportunity there, especially since there's no physical redesign necessary in order to make that happen. It's paint on the road. The Maple Place is, I think, you know, to be quite honest with you, something that you all are going to have to work out and the county are going to have to work out if this approach is the right approach for you all. From our technical review and our professional experience, we think this is the right approach for Maple Place. I think it's the opportunity that you can substantially transform a part of the borough into that is really now a liability into an asset, and address one of your major concerns, which is stormwater management in public sphere. I don't think that approaching the county in this point would be spinning your wheels. Again, I think we've established through the existing conditions report and the work that we're going to be doing a strong justification for where this is at. So through all of our conversations with them, we would not put something out there for you all to consider that we didn't think had merit with the county and would be worth pursuing based on our conversations with them.
If I can jump in,
And
this was
it would also be, as I said, Councilman Good, the proper protocol would be to the entire governing body for an advisory committee, not advisory committee, move something to the county and potentially waste planners and engineers' times at their level if that was something that all 7 people were in a hard no on. So I think their proper protocol would be how we're following it, and then if they can advance it to the county. Councilman Pacheco?
I was gonna say this was Councilman Good. This was actually, we debated over this. There was a small group that thought it might be worth bringing this to the county to see if there's any like hard no's from them, because you're right to have them come back and say, hey, you can't actually do that because of XYZ. The consensus at the end was that it was important to bring it back to this group and then have those discussions with the county.
Right, that's what we mentioned already.
Adam, I'm
Councilman
sorry for,
Beckenauer?
yeah, Adam, I'm sorry for opening a whole can of worms here by just mentioning a little bit of something that I guess isn't really validated. But 2 quick things. I'm assuming with all the new stormwater management things in place in New Jersey that this nicely ties in with that.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't get into it a lot, but I think that the stormwater utility is really outside the purview of our work, but we would strongly recommend that that's something that the borough look at, potentially in conjunction with neighboring municipalities. Water does not respect political boundaries. It goes where it wants. And we do think that it's an opportunity to look at not just green infrastructure, but addressing some of the larger infrastructure issues around stormwater.
And my last thing, again, this is personal to me, being on Broadway with having to walk, whether it's to the school or whatever. And Councilwoman Davidson brought this up, the Maple Place Bridge by La Patatong. When your pedestrian rendering, do you have a suggestion in there for walkable sidewalk? There really is no sidewalk. It's an asphalt mess.
Yeah, so Hannah can touch on this a little bit more, but every street that we are recommending, basically, we're recommending that there be a sidewalk on it. And we're recommending sort of the standard should be a 6-foot sidewalk, which allows either like 2 strollers or 2 wheelchairs to pass them. The reality of that, and you'll see in the ordinance, is that may or may not be possible on a bridge. Bridges are very complicated issues, and what the solution there is, we're not in a position to sort of make that recommendation here. But what would happen is if sidewalks weren't permitted for, say, on one side of it in a design concept, and this was something that the borough was advancing, not something that the county was advancing. There's actually a process by which those what are called exemptions, so basically like deviations away from the design, can be reviewed and discussed and approved before they're approved by, you know, the governing body. Now, it's a county road, so they're not subject to that same process. It's really a borough process, but there is a pathway for those conversations to happen internally, at least.
Okay.
To add on to that, the Maple Place Bridge is a great example of the fact that the street typologies are kind of a generalization of the environment along that whole street. And so one of the things that we looked at when we were kind of evaluating the length of Maple Place is that it is somewhat narrower at the Maple Street Bridge, but it's not significantly narrow. It's still about 40 feet in a lot of places. And so the standards and all of the kind of narrative that we're putting into the section on that typology is really going to talk about in constricted environments, and specifically calling out the bridge because it's one of those barriers that we identified early on and we heard a lot about. What is the priority? And so sidewalks being the most significant priority, those being required, except for where some environmental condition or other condition might prohibit that, followed by, you know, your travel lanes and your bike facilities. But prioritizing those vulnerable users and making sure that that connectivity from neighborhood to school, in a lot of cases, is maintained.
Thank you.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Hannah. Thanks.
Nice. Councilman Pacheco?
Oh, my hand is still
Your
up. Sorry, that's from before.
That's okay. Each council member went, we here earlier, so
Mayor?
did you have anything?
I just,
Or can we just go to
oh,
public?
sorry.
No, what's up, Dennis?
I was just going to say one of the reasons why I didn't choose to speak, just to clarify, was because I am on the committees, and I'd rather listen at this point tonight unless I can offer something constructive. Thank
That's
you.
actually exactly what I was about to say. I have been working on these committees with Councilman Fotopoulos and the mayor and Adam and Hannah and Trevor and everybody, and Keith. So I'd rather hear what my colleagues and the public have to say at this point.
Thanks.
I just have one more, I have two more questions that came up, if I can ask. So with the moving to storm drainage or storm management, sorry, we're going to be losing parking spots. Have you guys considered the impact that's going to have on the residential zones of Maple Place, 3rd Street? Because you know, again, but we do have residents, and some of those streets already on one side street parking. So again, I want to make sure we address the residential impacts, even though we know it's a great program or a great opportunity. I want to make sure, right, you know, where they're happy and they're not, you know, losing what we can consider.
Yeah, so I think that's a really great question. So one, I'll start with Maple Place. I mean, on-street parking on Maple Place is really, really limited from what we can tell. Like site visits, aerial photography does not show an extensive use of on-street parking on Maple Place. So we've created options for that, and the design can be flexible to allow that in areas where that's appropriate or needed. But we don't think that that's a particularly big issue. The other thing is and especially on the residential streets, what we really are looking for is one, like sort of areas where you shouldn't be parking anyways. So, you know, it's prohibited to park, I believe it's 25 feet within a crosswalk. So you shouldn't be parking in that space anyway. So that's an excellent opportunity for you to put, you know, something else in that space other than asphalt, basically, which nobody uses. The other thing is, you know, what we've sort of tried to do is also look for and illustrate the idea that it doesn't have to be the whole block. It can be little sections. You know, there are always parts between driveways, right, where it's not big enough to fit a car, but you could put something like a nice little stormwater management or a little rain garden in there. And that's where you know, the work of basically, you know, Trevor and the engineer who would be working on that project would have to sort of take these general recommendations and identify the specific locations for that. But yeah, I think the balance between parking and the need to continue to support that and stormwater management and bicycle and pedestrian facilities is certainly really critical. I don't know, Hannah, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I'll just add one quick thing, which is in these places, a lot of the areas that we noticed had higher parking demand or more were more dense than there were driveways. So it seemed like there might be more parking happening where areas kind of on the eastern side of town, closer to the historic district. And we also noticed that a lot of those streets were a little, there was a little bit of lack of clarity, or there might be people that are parking on the other side of the one-way parking today. So part of what we're looking at in those areas is kind of clarifying some of that and making it safer so that you're not having that same amount of kind of clipping of parked cars or, feeling like you can't quite get around the bend. And those are areas where we're also talking about, I don't want to miss an opportunity to mention First Street, where we are recommending some traffic calming techniques that don't necessarily require a ton of space, but require some visibility closer to the intersections and making sure that at some of those three-legged intersections, they create stopping points and kind of high visibility zones. So those might be some of the areas where we'd look at parking more closely, but that wouldn't be kind of an overall treatment on some of those more residential streets.
Thank you. Okay, council, can I please have a motion to the public? Initially, we'll keep it at 2 minutes per person, and then we can circle back if there's time left, if any of the members of the public want to ask another round of questions.
Motion.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, first, we'll go with anyone on the video. If you can raise your hand if you would like to speak. Mrs. Skeen?
Hi, Claire Skeen, 33 St. Peter Place. Much of what was presented this evening is quite ambitious, and by ambitious, I mean costly. I would love to see, and maybe once I have an opportunity to review all the documents that are going to be posted online, but I would love to see some more modest, easily attainable goals incorporated into our Complete Streets vision. And by that, I mean paved streets, sidewalks that are in good shape, crosswalks that are clearly marked, particularly at places where crosswalks don't currently exist. One of the reasons I love living in this town is because you can walk to anything. So I walked today to pick up my library book, and trying to cross Broad Street at 3rd Street to get to the library is taking your life in your hands. And then the last item is to enforce speed limits to the extent that speeding in this town is no longer an issue. So those are the more modest, sort of bite-sized improvements that I would love to see incorporated into a Complete Streets vision for Keyport. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else on the video? If you want to raise your hand if you'd like to speak.
May I just provide one point of input?
Sure.
Yeah. So I think the document that you're going to want to take a look at is the implementation plan, which really talks about sort of how you phase approach the recommendations in here. I would argue that actually a lot of what we've put in here is essentially paint on the ground, which is essentially the cheapest interventions that you can do. There's been a lot of discussion tonight about stormwater management and a lot of discussion about the sort of what I'd call more hard infrastructure interventions. As you start to get into the design guide when that gets released, I think you'll start to see that there's a lot of conversation in there about like improving the quality of crosswalks, defining and ensuring that sidewalks, when they're being like rebuilt, meet, you know, reasonable standards for people to be able to use them properly. So I think that there's a lot here, and you know, we can, I think it's mentioned in the design guideline, but Jersey City has actually done a great job using demonstration projects and paint on the ground as a way of sort of intermediary steps towards what would be sort of more physical interventions and or hard infrastructure interventions. So I hope that you don't see these recommendations as all being these big scale interventions. We really did try to pay attention to the quicker, faster, cheaper, easier solutions here.
Thank you. Mr. Kelsey, you had your hand up?
Yes, Andrew Kelsey, 29 St. Peter's Place. Can you, in your presentation, there was no mention of traffic calming. I heard it briefly mentioned for First Street. What else as on that topic is being thought of for traffic calming? It's definitely a big issue here in Keyport.
Yeah, why don't I hand that over to Hannah, because she can talk ad nauseum about traffic calming in this plan.
Yeah, so we identified a lot of the key areas, the key streets that see a lot of speeding right now, and that informed the kind of the different street typologies that have been created. I know you haven't been able to kind of, that wasn't really a big highlight of the plan at this point, but when the draft plan is released, that's a big part of kind of what drives what kind of treatments are involved, are recommended in each location. I'll give you an example with the treatment that we shared tonight, which is the typology that we shared, which is a neighborhood connector, what we're calling it. And that's really the streets like Beers and Atlantic and Broadway, where the streets are connect to Route 35 and 36. They're through streets that connect to regional roadways, but we know that they see some high speeds, and the environment could be significantly improved with traffic calming. This is kind of one example. We're recommending traffic calming measures on many of the recommendations, many of the streets through the borough. A lot of our interventions are focusing on the intersections, because we think that in terms of kind of making incremental improvements, to speak to Adam and Claire's point earlier, that you can kind of get a lot of bang for your buck if you focus on the intersections. And so we're recommending modifying the curb extensions in some of these places to make kind of slower and add visibility for people driving around the curve, as you can see in that pink thing on the screen on the left. And also looking at treatments like this is a chicane, which is a fun tool, a little bit different, that basically creates kind of a bit of a turn so that you maintain slower speeds and can get parking on different sides of the street. But it's really about kind of providing more clarity about what there is space for. And so you're making the roadway that people are traveling on a kind of a little bit more defined. That's kind of one example. But there's the kind of key takeaway is that intersections are really a focus of of the plan, and we're talking a lot about the ways that intersections can be calmed throughout.
The only thing that I will just add to that comment is that we really see traffic calming as only one of the many sort of solutions that need to be sort of put in place in order for people to feel safer on the streets. And that our experience has been that like heavy traffic tends to be not just a factor of the volume and not just a factor of the speed at which traffic is flowing, but for example, how close you are to that traffic. You know, where is that traffic in relationship to sort of like a buffer, like a parking lane or something like that. So we've tried to use a variety of different solutions to really make the pedestrians and bicyclists and drivers safer, and from a what I'd call like an actual perspective, and then also feel safer from a sort of experiential perspective.
Thank you. Anyone by show of hands that's on video before we turn to the phone lines? Mr. Graham? Can you unmute yourself, Mr. Graham, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Elmer Graham Jr., 22 St. Peter's Place. With the Complete Streets Initiative plan, I just want to say it's keep going forward with it. It's going to take time, but I think this can only help Keyport Borough in the long run. You know, I have a big interest in the pedestrian part. So, you know, it's going to help me keep Keyport Borough in the long run. Keep going forward with it. Thank you.
Anyone else on video before we turn over to the phone lines? Okay. Anyone that's on the phone lines, if you would like to speak or ask a question, please hit *6 on your phone so that you'll be able to speak.
Michael Lane, 51 First Street, Keyport.
Hi, Mr. Lane.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Adam, good evening. I want to build on what Councilwoman McNamara indicated. I live on a county street, and two really significant issues are speed limit and the size of the vehicles. We have tractor trailers going down this street at 40+ miles an hour. And the sidewalks are only 3 feet wide, and they set back about a foot from the curb. So at times it's very scary. So have you had any dialogue with the county relative to speed limits on the county roads in Keyport?
So we have not had a dialogue with the county on speed limits. We are, as part of this plan, going to be putting in what are sort of recommended speed limits for all of these street typologies, and we can certainly, when we have a conversation with the county, raise that issue.
What kind of speed limit are you thinking about for First Street?
I don't think we have that in front of us right now. Hannah's shaking her head that she doesn't have this. I don't know off the top of my head. I apologize.
Now, I'm sorry, Hannah, go ahead.
Sorry. The other thing I'll mention with regard to speed is that we find that it is often the case that in addition to the speed limit, it's equally important to make sure that during especially like off-peak periods, traffic is actually moving in that speed. and the benefit of some of the intersection treatments that we're talking about, and that I mentioned earlier, is that they narrow the width of the street, and so you're driving in what feels like a more pedestrian focused environment. It feels like you're driving into a town where people live, and that all kind of works in tandem with the actual speed limit itself to keep traffic moving at a slower pace.
Well, actually, sections of First Street are so narrow that the residents are parking their cars on the sidewalks. So we already got a narrow street.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And
that's something that we're sort of talking about as part of this, and how to address some of that, because we do see cars parking on the sidewalk as a major concern and a major issue that has a big impact on walkability, because as you say, with a 3-foot sidewalk, if there's a car on it, you're stuck. And that is one thing if you're young and spry and can, hop over the hood of the car. It's another thing, if you have any sort of mobility limitations. So certainly something we're talking about.
Yeah, there's multiple blocks in First Street where the cars are parked on the sidewalk. Second question is, where did I miss it? Is there documentation where I can go to read about the traffic calming recommendations you're making?
So that document is not available yet. That is going to be addressed mostly in the design guide. So it is touched very briefly in the ordinance, essentially calling attention to the fact that it's a recommended strategy. But the design guide's not available yet, but when it is available, we will be notifying everybody of it. So.
And what is the time frame for the design guide?
That's going to depend a little bit on our conversations with the county, because before we can release the design guideline, we have to have that conversation with the county, and we are moving as fast as we can to try to get that out to everybody, because we do know people want to see it.
How does it relate to the work that CME is doing on the pedestrian safety improvement program for First Street? Does the CME work have to wait until these design guidelines are available?
No, we've had a conversation with Trevor and have been working, understand the improvements on everything that is being done on the TAP grant is consistent with the design guidelines that we're going to be doing. So that does not, the two projects are in conversation with one another, but are not dependent on one another. I don't know if, Trevor, if there's anything you want to add to that.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, I just want to add that we have been involved in all the meetings to date. So any input that goes into the design guidelines, we will have firsthand knowledge of that. And we will make sure that the design of the TAP grant follows those recommendations.
All right, then I have one final comment. When you look at the rain gardens, they recharge the water table. Have you evaluated the water table along Maple Place? I know I had a relative who was looking for a home in Keyport, and I spent about 2 months looking at homes in Keyport, and I experienced that homes along Church and Maple, 2 or 3 blocks north and south of Maple along Church, had multiple sump pumps in their basements, and they still had a foot of water in the basement. And now you're talking about recharging. So I think there are stormwater limits on where you can do recharge based on the water table. So you need to take that into account.
Yeah, I would suggest that you look at the existing conditions report. We have a section on the stormwater management, basically, and an examination of soil conditions and groundwater recharge rates. The one thing that I would call attention to is there's sort of 2 types of, it's not exactly the right way to think about it, but there are green stormwater management systems that essentially, as you say, recharge the water table. There are also retention systems that essentially can slow the rate at which water enters into your gray stormwater system. And so, again, I'm not an expert in this, but I did talk to our stormwater management person in our firm, and his sort of top level review suggests that it merits further investigation.
Yeah. And my only final comment on Maple Place, with the movement of the cars to the center line, that literally creates the same problem we have on First Street. It puts the trucks and the vehicles literally inches from the curbs. And so you really need to have traffic calming. You really need to have speed limit control. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Any other members of the public on the phone line, please hit *6 if you would like to speak or comment. Okay, going once, going twice. Can I please have a motion to close to the public?
Motion. Second. I don't know who got it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. At this point in time, Ms. London, would we be able to pass a motion? Well, not pass it, but request a motion for the planning team to move this to the county?
Yes, Mayor.
So I would need someone to motion.
Just a question
what are we doing?
This plan is, I mean, what we were just showed with the Maple and the Third, is that what we're talking about moving to the county?
To move the design plan that they're working on and have further conversations with the county, and some of them would include the stormwater management like you saw today. And plan, you know, option A, B, C, so to speak, that he was showing earlier, and the implementation and the outreach summary is what you would be bringing next, correct, Keith and Adam?
Yeah, I mean, it would essentially be a pared down version of this exact same presentation that we were giving you, but with only the sections relevant to the county and with some of the background information pulled out because they're already sort of aware of it.
Can I try and craft a motion? See if the council, because I understand the council's concern. I just want to say that the way I'm looking at this is it's a 10,000 foot view. Some of the comments here were fantastic. Ms. Skeen's concern about the finances is well thought of here. And what we were looking at today was often referenced in our team meetings as a 10,000 foot view, 10-year plan, phased approach. I'm focusing on Ms. Skeen's comments because it sort of ran the gamut of my thinking over time. And I've had unfortunately for me, but unfortunately for the public today, I've had the benefit of sitting in these meetings for the last few months. So I've seen the evolution of this. And I know that if we say yes, go to the county and have conversations, which we're not, which is basically covered by the grant, is it not, Adam? Right? We're not paying the professionals to go to the county. If we say yes to this, what they're doing is they're giving the county the thoughts of what things can look like moving forward and in the future. It's not a commitment by us to do the plan, to implement the plan, but what it does do is it opens the door for conversation to the county. Again, I'm gonna, my motion is that I make a motion that we okay the professionals to bring the conversation and this presentation to the county as it stands, with the understanding that the borough does not make any commitment that we're going to do this in the future, and that if any changes come forth or if we have any changes to this, we will approach the county, because by then FHI and the other professionals aren't going to be in here anymore. So my motion, I hope you didn't write that. Did you write that down?
That's a really long motion for Michelle.
Right. Let me just, I'm gonna reword it, Mayor. My motion is that we allow the professionals to bring this as seen, as written to the county with the understanding that no commitments by the borough are going to be made to implement these plans. It's just to open up conversation with the county. How's that? That was the best I can do.
I like it, but I can't second.
Second.
I just have a
Please have
question.
roll call.
Is that okay
hold
for
on a
us to
second.
do, Ms. London? Is that acceptable for us to submit it that way without saying that we're not committing to the county? Because the county may push back on us then? I just want to make sure that it's okay. It's not going to be misunderstood as we're just that's all. It's more a question for Ms. London or for whomever's owning the project.
Well, I think the wording is fine. We could probably finesse it a little better, but I mean, the spirit of it is correct.
Sorry.
Okay. Any other discussion before we go to roll call? Can I please have a roll call, Michelle?
Councilmember Good,
Yes.
Councilmember Pacheco,
Yes.
Councilmember Fotopoulos,
Yes.
Councilmember McDermott,
Yes.
Councilmember Davidson, Councilmember Davidson.
Yes.
Thank you.
I thought she was pausing.
I didn't hear you either.
I did for a minute.
And Councilmember McNamara.
Yes.
Thank you.
I would like to thank everyone from the professionals, from the governing body, and fellow committee members and members of the public for taking 2 hours of their evening this evening for what could potentially be a major improvement to Keyport if even any of these parts came to fruition in the foreseeable future. So I really want to thank everyone for that.
Mayor,
And,
can I just,
Lisa.
can I add one point? I just want to make sure that we're setting expectations around our conversations with the county here. I love Dennis's wording here, and I anticipate that the county is going to be equally cautious in the way that they talk about their commitment or whatever it is to this. The win coming out of these conversations is a willingness to further engage the borough in conversations about advancing these design plans.
Yep.
That doesn't mean I can almost assure you that they're not going to come back and say, yes, when do we start? Like, that's just, not going to happen.
Oh, we could try.
But we could try. My dreams. I mean, I
And they're going to pay
pretend
for it too, right? And they're going to
exactly.
and pay for the upkeep.
Yeah, I mean, I pretend that I'm that good of a planner, but I know in my deepest heart that that's not true. So, but what we're looking for from them is basically that they are open to conversations for that, and that they're willing to continue that dialogue. And we think if that's the place where the county is at, that is a consultant firm, that we think that's a great place to be at going forward, and it would be worth adopting this as the formal design plan. Sorry, Mayor, I just wanted to sort of set expectations around that, and thank everybody for participating.
No problem. Keith, Adam, or Hannah, do you have any other final words? Or Trevor?
Thank you, everyone, for all of your thoughts tonight. And I just wanted to kind of add on to Adam's point here, is that through this process, we have established a really good dialogue with the county on with relation to the project. The NJTPA has the county sitting as one of its key members on the board, and we have that obligation to kind of continue dialogue. We have good relationships, and I think that we're bringing that to the table to help foster dialogue here and hopefully establish the basis so that it can continue after the life of this particular project. So that's all I wanted to add. I think, really, I think this is the right move to move forward, and the county will come back with some comments, and they'll have concerns as well, and we'll address it through the lens of Keyport as well as our ability to do so. So thank you all.
Thank you, Keith. Okay. Kathy, is that a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great evening.
Good night,
Be
everyone.
well and stay
Night.
safe.
Night, thanks.